There is a bed of coals sitting low in the pit behind my barn, gone past the orange flame and down into that deep grey ash that holds heat like a held breath. I have got a cast iron skillet sitting right in the heart of it, and it has been there long enough now that when I hold my palm flat above it, I have to pull back quick. That skillet is close to 800 degrees, and most folks watching this at home do not own a thermometer that even reads that high, which is fine, because you do not need one. You need your hand and your good sense, and I am going to teach you both today. Everybody thinks they know how to cook a cheeseburger. It is the first thing half of us ever learned to cook, standing on a stool next to a mother or a grandfather, flipping a patty on a Sunday afternoon, and because it is the first thing we learn, most of us never learn it twice. We cook the same cheeseburger our whole lives, the same dry patty, the same rubber cheese, the same bun that goes soggy before you get to the third bite, and we call that good enough because we do not know there is anything past it. I'm going to tell you right now there is a trick, one single trick, that separates every good cheeseburger you have ever eaten from the extraordinary ones, and it is not the meat, and it is not the cheese, and it is not even the fire, though we will talk plenty about all three. It is something almost nobody does, and once I show it to you, you will wonder how you ever cooked a burger without it. But I am not going to hand you that trick first. A meal like this is built in order, same as a house is built from the foundation up, and if I hand you the roof before you have got walls, none of it will make sense. So walk with me. Before I go any further, I want to say one thing and then leave it be. Everything my family has learned about fire and meat over the better part of 100 years, more than any video could ever hold, I have put down in a book at eliasoder.com. If you want the whole of it, it is there waiting. I will not bring it up again. Now, the meat. A cheeseburger lives or dies on the meat, and most folks buy it wrong before they ever light a fire. They grab a tray off the cooler shelf, ground who knows when, packed tight in plastic that has been sweating against the meat for who knows how many days. Ground beef spoils faster than any other cut because grinding tears the meat open to the air, and the air gets in and does its slow damage. I do not trust a tray I did not grind myself, and you should not either. You do not need anything fancy to do this right. An old hand-crank grinder, the kind that clamps to a table edge, will do the job as well today as it did 70 years ago. I start with a chuck roast, not a lean cut, because lean meat is quiet meat, and quiet meat makes a sad, dry burger, no matter what you pile on top of it. Fat is where the flavor lives, and fat is where the juice comes from, and I want a good ratio of about 3 parts meat to 1 part fat, which a chuck roast will give you almost without trying. I slice it down into strips that will feed easy into the grinder's mouth, and I keep it cold the whole while, near half frozen, because cold meat grinds clean and warm meat grinds into a paste that no burger deserves. 1 pass through the coarse plate is all it needs. Not fine, not smooth. You want to still see the threads of fat and lean sitting loose against each other, because that looseness is what gives you a tender bite instead of something tight and rubbery. Now we come to forming the patties, and here is where I want you to slow down and listen, because this is where most cheeseburgers are ruined before they ever see heat. Folks grab a fistful of that good ground beef and they squeeze it, they roll it, they pack it down tight into a firm little ball, like they are building a snowball for a fight. And every bit of pressure they put into that meat is pressure that pushes the juice and the air right back out of it. Handle that meat like it is something asleep that you do not want to wake. I take just enough for 1 patty, cup it loose in my palms, and pat it into a round barely holding itself together. Loose hands make a tender burger. Tight hands make a tough one. Remember that line, because I am going to circle back to it later, and it matters more than you think. There is a second mistake almost everyone makes right here too, and it has to do with the shape of that patty, not just how firm you pack it. A flat round of ground beef wants to swell up in the center as it cooks, puffing into a little dome, so that you end up with a burger thick in the middle and thin at the edges, sitting crooked and lopsided under its bun like a boat taking on water. The old fix for this is simple, and I will show it to you, along with the salting, the fire, and that one trick I promised you, right after we get these patties formed and ready to meet the heat. So here's that fix for the doming, and it is nothing more than your own thumb. Before that patty ever sees fire, press your thumb deep into the center of it, right down to nearly the board, and leave a real dimple there, a little well sunk into the meat. As that burger cooks and wants to swell up into a dome, that dimple fills itself back in, and the patty comes off the fire flat and even instead of humped in the middle. It is a small thing. It costs you 2 seconds. But it is the difference between a burger that sits square on its bun and one that rocks back and forth like a turtle flipped on its shell. Do not skip it. I have never once regretted pressing that dimple in, and I have regretted forgetting it plenty. Now the salt. I season both sides of the patty right before it goes to the heat, never before, because salt, sitting too long on raw ground meat, pulls the moisture out of it and turns the texture tight and dense, which is the last thing we want after all that careful loose handling. A good coarse salt, pressed in gentle with your fingers right at the very end. That is all it takes. The fire and the pan is where folks start getting nervous because they have been taught by every restaurant griddle and every home stovetop instruction to cook things at a polite, moderate heat. I am telling you to throw that thinking out. A cheeseburger wants ferocious heat, heat that scares you a little. That cast iron skillet I told you about at the start has been sitting in those coals long enough that it holds its warmth even and hard clear across the surface, and when that patty finally touches it, it does not sizzle politely. It roars. The fat starts rendering and popping almost the second it lands, and I press it down just once, firm but gentle, to seat it flat against that heat, and then I leave it alone completely. You do not poke a burger. You do not press on it again just to watch the juice run out into the fire, because every drop that leaves that patty is a drop that is not sitting in your mouth later. You let it sit and build itself a crust, dark and deep for a few minutes, until you can see the edges gone from red to brown and the fat pooling and bubbling up around the sides. Whatever you are cooking on, and I do not care if it is a stone, a griddle, or the cast iron I am using today, the rule never changes. The surface has to be hot before the meat ever touches it. A cool surface steams a burger and turns it gray and sad. A screaming hot surface sears it and turns it a deep, savory brown. And that brown crust is where nearly all the flavor of a cheeseburger actually lives. Folks chase flavor by adding sauces and toppings when the truth is most of that flavor was sitting right there in the crust the whole time, waiting on them to get the heat right. One flip. Just one. A burger turned over and over on the fire loses its crust, same as a man loses his nerve. A little at a time until there is nothing left holding it together. You flip it once and right onto that seared top side goes the cheese, because this is a cheeseburger and the cheese is not a garnish here. It is the second half of the point. Now I want a cheese that melts all the way through, soft and molten, draping down over the edges of that patty like it is trying to get away from the heat. A sharp cheese off the block with real fat running through it will do that. The soft, individually wrapped slices most folks reach for do not melt so much as they go limp, and limp is not the same thing as melted. I lay 2 slices on generous, and then comes the old trick to melt it through fast and even. I take the lid off an old pot, or even a clean scrap of tin, and I set it right over that burger like a little dome, trapping the heat rising up off the iron and turning it into a tiny oven for maybe 45 seconds. Lift that lid, and you will find the cheese gone glossy and slack, pooling down over every side of the meat like it was poured there. And now, finally, here's the trick I promised you at the very start of this cook, the one thing almost nobody does, and the reason most cheeseburgers you have ever eaten fall a little short of what they could be. It has to do with what happens in the 30 seconds right after that cheese has melted and right before that burger ever meets its bun, and it changes the whole character of the bite. I am not going to rush through it. I want you to see exactly how it is done with your own eyes so you never forget it once you have got it. Here it is, plain and simple, so you cannot miss it. Once that cheese has gone soft and glossy under the lid, I do not lift that burger straight off the iron onto the bun. I pull the skillet off the direct heat, just to the side of the coals, and I drop in a good spoonful of butter right there beside the meat. It melts fast in that heat and starts to foam and brown at the edges, turning nutty and dark, and then I tip that skillet just slightly and spoon that browned butter up and over the top of the burger, again and again, maybe 10 or 12 times, basting it the way you would baste a good roast. That basting does 2 things at once, and both of them matter. It carries that nutty browned butter flavor down through the melted cheese and into the crust of the meat itself, and it also finishes the cooking of that burger gently from the top, so the inside stays pink and juicy even while the outside holds its sear. Nobody does this with a cheeseburger. They do it with a steak in a fine kitchen and never once think to bring the same respect to a piece of ground beef, and that is the whole mistake right there. A cheeseburger is not a lesser cut. It only gets treated like one. After that basting, I pull the burger off the heat entirely and let it rest on the board for a full 2 minutes before it ever meets its bun, same as you would rest any good piece of meat, because those juices we protected all the way through need a minute to settle back into the meat instead of running out onto the plate the second you bite in. 2 minutes. Set a timer if you have to. It is the most skipped step in the whole cook, and it costs you nothing but patience. While that burger rests, the bun. A cheeseburger like this one does not deserve a soft, pale bun straight out of a bag that turns to paste the second the juice touches it. A good sturdy roll, split in 2, gets laid face down right in that same skillet, in that same butter and rendered fat left behind from the burger and the bacon, until the cut sides go golden and crisp at the edges. Never skip this. A toasted bun holds up under all that juice and cheese instead of collapsing in your hands, and it picks up every bit of that rich, nutty flavor left behind in the pan. An untoasted bun on a burger like this is a wasted opportunity sitting right there in plain sight. Now we build it, and the order is not an accident. Bottom bun down first, toasted side up. The burger goes on next, cheese still glossy and pooling down its sides, set directly onto that toasted bread so it catches every drop instead of losing it to the plate. Whatever you love on top of that, a few strips of crisp bacon, a slice of ripe tomato, a leaf of something green goes on next. Though I will tell you plainly that a burger built this way hardly needs much more than it already has. Top bun on, toasted and crowned. Press it down just slightly with the flat of your palm, and you will feel it give just a little under that cheese and that juice, and that is exactly how you know you built it right. Now I want to be plain with you about something else, same as I have been plain with you before. There's a reason most folks have never once basted a cheeseburger in butter, never once rested it before building it, never once thought a piece of ground beef deserved that kind of care. It is because an entire industry has spent decades teaching us that a cheeseburger is fast food, cheap food, something you grab through a window in under 2 minutes, because your time is worth more than the meal is. And once you believe that, you stop looking for tricks like the one I just showed you, because why would you bother perfecting something you already believe is beneath perfecting? That is not an accident, and it is not a conspiracy either. Nobody sat in a room and planned to make a nation forget how good a cheeseburger could be. It is just what happens when fast and cheap wins out over good and real long enough, one paper wrapper at a time, until a feast food gets treated like a throwaway one. So that is the trick. That is the whole of it. Butter, basted and browned, carried down into the cheese and the crust, and 2 minutes of patience before the first bite. A small thing. The kind of thing almost nobody does, and the kind of thing that changes everything once you do. Tell me down in the comments, have you ever basted a burger before today, or is this the first you are hearing of it? And what is the one thing on your cheeseburger that you could never leave off? Tell me. Next time, I want to show you what happens to all that beautiful fat and butter left behind in the pan after a cook like this one, because the old families never let a drop of that go to waste, and neither should you. Until then, take good care of the ones at your table, and keep a kitchen and a fire that remembers how good a simple thing can be when it is done right.